The abandoned steel mill echoed with footsteps as Jack Miller sprinted through rusted corridors. The small boy clutched protectively in one arm, his other hand gripping Elizabeth's wrist, guiding her through the darkness. Sweat glistened on his weathered face, determination hardening his pale blue eyes. Behind them, voices shouted flashlight beams cutting through dust-filled air. "This way," Jack whispered, pulling Elizabeth behind a massive furnace, just as bullets pinged against metal nearby. He hadn't expected that helping a lost child in a train station would lead to this moment. Running for their lives, protecting a boy who grabbed his hand one rainy afternoon in Pittsburgh's Union Station. Before we dive in, drop a comment where you're watching from and hit subscribe for more stories like this. In 991, Pittsburgh was where Jack Miller called home, and where one small act of kindness changed his life forever. Rain pelted the grand windows of Pittsburgh's Union Station, drumming a steady rhythm against the century-old glass. Jack Miller stood beneath the vaulted ceiling, his weathered face illuminated by the warm glow of the station's historic chandeliers. At 58, his 6-foot frame still carried the straight-backed posture of his military days, though time and hard work they had etched deep lines around his pale blue eyes. His granddaughter Emma slept against his shoulder, her strawberry blonde curls spilling over his faded denim jacket. Jack checked his watch again, a simple Timex that had survived Desert Storm and the 28 years since. His ride was now 40 minutes late, and Emma was getting heavy. The 5-year-old had fallen asleep almost immediately after he'd picked her up from kindergarten, exhausted from a day of learning and playing. 15 more minutes, he muttered to himself, shifting Emma's weight. Then we're calling a cab. The rain had soaked through his boots during their walk from the bus stop to the station, and his socks were uncomfortably damp. The familiar ache in his right knee, a souvenir from his military service, had intensified with the weather, but Jack had learned decades ago to compartmentalize discomfort. Union Station had once been the beating heart of Pittsburgh when steel was king and the city's foundries glowed red day and night. Now it stood as a beautiful relic of that bygone era, its grandeur preserved even as the city around it transformed. Jack appreciated the station's steadfast presence, an old soldier like himself weathering the years with dignity. He'd been fixing heating and cooling systems in buildings like this for most of his adult life. After the military HVAC work had provided a stable living, if not a luxurious one, it had been enough when Sarah was alive, his only daughter Emma's mother. But since the car accident last year, the financial burden of raising Emma alone had stretched his resources thin. A commotion near the main entrance drew Jack's attention. A small boy weaved through the crowd, clearly distressed, his tearful face scanning the busy terminal with increasing panic. Most travelers stepped around him without a second glance, their eyes fixed on phones or departure boards, too caught up in their own journeys to notice his distress. The boy ran blindly, his small sneakers squeaking on the polished floor until he collided directly with Jack's legs. Instinctively, the child grabbed Jack's free hand, looking up with wispy, frightened eyes. "I lost my mom," he said, his voice quavering with the effort of being brave. Jack knelt down carefully, keeping Emma balanced against his shoulder as he lowered himself to the boy's eye level. "Hey there, buddy. It's okay," he said, his deep voice softening to the gentle tone he used with Emma after nightmares. "We'll find her together." "What's your name?" "Ethan," the boy sniffled, wiping his nose with his sleeve. "I'm Jack, and this sleeping princess is my granddaughter Emma." He nodded toward Emma, who stirred slightly but didn't wake. "Where did you last see your mom, Ethan?" Ethan pointed vaguely toward the departure boards. "By the big numbers. We were going to Washington." Jack nodded. "The Pennsylvanian, probably. What's your mom wearing, so we can spot her owner?" "A blue coat," Ethan said after a moment's thought, "and shoes that make clicking sounds when she walks." Jack scanned the crowded terminal. That description could match dozens of women in the station. He spotted a young female employee passing by and flagged her down. "Excuse me, miss. This young man's lost his mother. They were near the departure board for the Washington train. Can you help us page her?" The woman barely paused. "Lost children need to be reported at the customer service desk," she recited, pointing toward a counter with a line at least 20 people deep. "It's policy." "He's 5 years old," Jack said, his voice taking on an edge. "Are we really going to make him wait in that line while his mother is probably frantic?" The employee shrugged. "I don't make the rules, sir." She was already moving away, the attention shifting to her next task. Jack felt his jaw tighten. Some things never changed. Bureaucracy placing procedure above common sense, whether in the military or civilian life. Ethan's grip on his hand tightened, the small fingers surprisingly strong. Jack made a decision. All right, Ethan, we're not waiting in that line. Let's go find your mom ourselves. He gently roused Emma, who blinked awake with the mild confusion of children pulled from deep sleep. Grandpa, she murmured. Hey, sunshine, we need to help this boy find his mom. Can you walk for a bit? Emma nodded, rubbing her eyes as Jack set her down. Her curious gaze immediately focused on Ethan. Hi, she said simply. I'm Emma. I'm Ethan, the boy replied, his distress momentarily forgotten in the way children can instantly connect. Hold hands, you two, Jack instructed, taking Emma's hand while keeping Ethan's firmly in his other. We're going on a mom-finding mission. They moved through the station toward the departure area for the Washington train, Jack's eyes constantly scanning for a woman in a blue coat who might be searching for her son. The terminal was crowded with the evening rush, commuters heading home, travelers catching the last trains out, families reuniting amid the controlled chaos of public transit. As they approached the gate area, Jack heard a woman's voice rise above the ambient noise, sharp with panic, calling a name. Ethan, Ethan. The boy's head snapped up. That's my mom. A tall woman in a navy blue wool coat pushed through the crowd, her black heels indeed clicking rapidly against the floor. Her dark hair was pulled back in an elegant twist that emphasized striking features. High cheekbones, a strong jawline, and intense blue eyes currently wide with worry. Despite her obvious distress, there was something commanding about her presence, an aura of authority that caused people to step aside as she approached. Ethan, she cried again, spotting her son. Ethan released Jack's hand and sprinted toward her. The woman dropped to her knees regardless of her expensive-looking coat and wrapped her son in a fierce embrace. For a moment, her composed exterior cracked completely as she closed her eyes, holding Ethan as if he might disappear again. Jack stood back, Emma's hand in his, watching the reunion with quiet satisfaction. Mission accomplished. Time to slip away and continue their own journey home. But as he turned to leave, the woman looked up, her gaze locking onto Jack with surprising intensity. She rose gracefully, keeping Ethan's hand firmly in hers, and approached. You found my son, she said. It wasn't a question, but there was a tremor beneath the composed voice. He found me, actually, Jack replied with a slight smile. Ran right into me. She studied him for a moment, her gaze taking in his worn jacket, his work boots, the simple dignity of his bearing. I'm Elizabeth Reynolds, she said, extending her free hand. Jack recognized the name immediately. Elizabeth Reynolds, CEO of Reynolds Technologies, one of Pittsburgh's most successful clean energy companies. Her face occasionally appeared in the business section of the newspaper, a rare female CEO who had turned her father's engineering firm into a tech powerhouse. Jack Miller, he replied, shaking her hand. Her grip was firm, confident. Elizabeth knelt down to Emma's level. And who is this young lady? I'm Emma, his granddaughter replied. I'm 5 3/4. Elizabeth smiled, the expression warming her entire face. Thank you for helping your grandfather find my Ethan, Emma. We're good at finding things, Emma said with childish pride. Grandpa finds broken air conditioners and makes them work again. Elizabeth glanced up at Jack with raised eyebrows. Is that so? HVAC repair and installation, Jack explained. I work on the older buildings downtown mostly. As Elizabeth stood, a harried-looking man in a tailored suit approached, juggling a phone and tablet. Ms. Reynolds, the car is waiting, and you have the conference call in 30 minutes. Elizabeth nodded to him before turning back to Jack. Mr. Miller. Jack, please. Jack, she corrected with a small smile. I cannot thank you enough, with everything happening these days. She glanced around the station with a wariness that seemed out of place for a routine trip. I would have expected most people to simply direct Ethan to a security guard or customer service desk. Most would, Jack agreed. But I've been where Ethan was, lost and scared. And where you were, terrified of losing someone precious. His hand rested briefly on Emma's head. Something unspoken passed between them. A recognition, perhaps, of shared experience beneath their vastly different circumstances. I insist on giving you a ride home, Elizabeth said suddenly. It's the least I can do, and that rain isn't letting up. Jack started to decline, a lifelong habit of self-reliance, but a glance at Emma's tired face changed his mind. The thought of waiting for another bus in the rain with an exhausted 5-year-old wasn't appealing. "That's very kind of you," he said finally. The car waiting outside was a black Cadillac Escalade with tinted windows. The driver, a solid man with a military haircut that Jack recognized immediately, opened the door without a word. Jack helped Emma in first, then climbed in beside her, noting the vehicle's luxurious interior. Ethan settled in next to Emma, and the two children were soon engaged in animated conversation about superhero preferences. To Jack's surprise, Elizabeth sat up front rather than maintaining the separation that wealth usually dictated. She gave the driver Jack's address, which he hadn't yet provided, then turned slightly in her seat. "Commonwealth Plaza, right? The converted insurance building." Jack nodded, not entirely surprised she knew the address. Someone in her position would have staff to gather such information quickly. "7th floor. It's smaller than what we had before, but the location works better now." As the Escalade pulled away from the station, Jack watched Pittsburgh slide by through rain-streaked windows. The city was a study in contrast, gleaming glass towers rising alongside century-old brick buildings, technology firms occupying spaces once dedicated to steel production. The rain softened the urban landscape, blurring the hard edges between old and new. Elizabeth checked her phone repeatedly, her face reflecting the professional concerns that clearly hadn't paused despite her personal emergency. Jack recognized the look, the weight of responsibility that couldn't be set aside even for a moment. "Bad timing getting separated in the station," Jack said conversationally. Elizabeth's shoulders tensed almost imperceptibly. "Yes, I had a call I couldn't ignore. Ethan was right beside me, and then..." She shook her head. "One moment of distraction. It's all it takes." "It happens," Jack said simply. "Kids can vanish in a heartbeat." "It shouldn't have happened," Elizabeth replied, her voice dropping so the children wouldn't hear. "Not with my security protocols." Jack glanced at the driver, noting the slight bulge of a shoulder holster beneath his jacket. More than a chauffeur, then. Interesting. The Escalade pulled up to Commonwealth Plaza, a 1920s neoclassical building with ornate stonework that had been repurposed into upscale apartments. The grandeur of its exterior belied the modestly sized units inside, Pittsburgh practicality winning out over pretension. "Thank you for the ride," Jack said as the driver opened the door, rain now falling in a gentle mist rather than the earlier downpour. Elizabeth reached into her purse and withdrew a sleek business card. It bore only the Reynolds Technologies logo, her name, and a phone number. No title, no office address. "Jack," she said, her voice lower now, "I don't make offers, I don't mean. If you ever need anything at all, use this number. It's my private line." Jack studied the card, then Elizabeth's face. "That's generous, but..." "It's not generosity," she interrupted. "It's recognition. You did something today that most people wouldn't. You stopped. You helped. You cared." She glanced at Ethan, who was showing Emma something on a small electronic device. "That matters to me." Jack pocketed the card with a nod. "Thank you." As he helped Emma out of the vehicle, Elizabeth called after him. "Your granddaughter is lucky to have you, Mr. Miller." Jack looked back, meeting her gaze. "Your son is lucky to have you, Ms. Reynolds." Something unspoken passed between them, a mutual recognition perhaps of the burdens they each carried. Then the door closed and the Escalade pulled away, leaving Jack and Emma on the sidewalk beneath the golden glow of the building's historic sconces. "She was pretty," Emma observed as they entered the lobby. "Yes, she was," Jack agreed, checking their mail before heading to the elevator. "And rich," Emma added, "like super rich. Ethan says they have a helicopter." Jack chuckled. "Is that so?" "Uh-huh. And he has a whole room just for his toys." The elevator carried them to the 7th floor, halfway up the converted building. Jack's apartment was on the north side, offering a view of the Allegheny River and the old industrial areas beyond. The unit was modest, 2 bedrooms, an open living area with a kitchen along one wall, and the original hardwood floors that creaked in specific spots Jack had memorized for late-night navigation. What the apartment lacked in size, it made up for in character. Tall windows, crown molding, and the solid construction of an era when buildings were made to last. Jack had furnished it simply but comfortably, with pieces that favored function over style. The walls held few decorations, save for Emma's artwork, a shadow box containing Jack's military medals, and a single photograph of Sarah, forever 34, her smile frozen in time. As he prepared a simple dinner, spaghetti with sauce from a jar, but doctored with fresh garlic and herbs, Jack found himself thinking about the encounter at the station, about Elizabeth Reynolds and the peculiar intensity in her eyes when she'd handed him her card. He'd met wealthy people before, of course. Many of the buildings he serviced were owned by Pittsburgh's elite. But there had been something different about Elizabeth, a genuineness beneath the polished exterior, a recognition that had passed between them that transcended their different circumstances. After putting Emma to bed, Jack settled in his recliner with a cup of coffee. He pulled out Elizabeth's business card, turning it over in his fingers. On impulse, he reached for his laptop, an aging machine that served its limited purposes adequately, and searched for Elizabeth Reynolds. The results painted the picture of a remarkable career. Took over her father's company at 27 after his unexpected death. Transformed Reynolds Technologies from a regional engineering firm into a leader in clean energy innovation. Divorced from Ethan's father 3 years ago, a brief mention in most articles. Current estimated worth $1.9 billion. Jack whistled softly. The woman who had knelt on a dirty station floor in her designer coat was one of the richest people in Pennsylvania. And yet there had been nothing affected about her gratitude or her concern for her son. Money changed many things, but not apparently the fundamental fears and joys of parenthood. He closed the laptop and moved to the window, looking out at the city lights reflecting off the dark river. His thoughts drifted to Sarah, to the years after his wife had died when he'd raised their daughter alone. To the unexpected joy of being a grandfather, and then the crushing responsibility of becoming Emma's guardian after the accident. Life had a way of surprising you, of taking sharp turns when you least expected it. Jack placed Elizabeth's card on his modest desk, expecting never to use it. People like Elizabeth Reynolds might cross paths with people like him occasionally, but their worlds remained fundamentally separate. Tomorrow would be another day of fixing air conditioners and heating systems, of picking Emma up from school, of making ends meet with dignity, if not abundance. He had no way of knowing that 3 days later, Elizabeth Reynolds would appear at his door, and the boundary between their worlds would begin to dissolve. The knock came at precisely 6 o'clock on a Tuesday evening. Jack had just returned from work, his hands still bearing traces of the industrial grease from an ancient boiler he'd spent the day reviving. Emma was at the kitchen table, concentrated on her kindergarten homework, coloring shapes with careful precision. When Jack opened the door, he momentarily failed to recognize the woman standing there. Gone was the corporate power suit and formal hairstyle. Instead, Elizabeth Reynolds wore jeans, a gray Penn State sweatshirt, and her dark hair loose around her shoulders. She carried a paper grocery bag in one arm and a bouquet of sunflowers in the other. "I hope you like pasta," she said with a smile that seemed surprisingly genuine. Jack blinked in surprise. "Ms. Reynolds." "Elizabeth, please," she corrected. "May I come in?" Jack stepped aside, acutely aware of his work clothes and the modest apartment beyond. Elizabeth entered with the confidence of someone comfortable anywhere, her gaze taking in the space with appreciation rather than judgment. "This place," she said, looking around, "it feels lived in. That's a compliment, by the way." Emma looked up from her homework, her eyes widening. "You're Ethan's mom." Elizabeth smiled warmly. "I am. And you must be the famous Emma he's been talking about nonstop." "Is Ethan here?" Emma asked, looking toward the door hopefully. "Not today, sweetheart. He's with his tutor, but he asked me to give you this." Elizabeth reached into her pocket and produced a small Captain America action figure. "He said it's better than Iron Man, but I think that's a matter of some debate." Emma accepted the gift with reverence. "Thank you. You have Black Widow, so now they can be a team." Elizabeth set the groceries on the counter and the sunflowers beside them. "I thought I might make dinner, as a proper thank you." She glanced at Jack. "Unless you already have plans." Jack was about to explain that his dinner plans involved reheating yesterday's leftovers, but Emma answered first. "Grandpa was going to make mac and cheese from the box," she announced. "Again?" Elizabeth laughed, a genuine sound that transformed her face, softening the sharp edges of her professional persona. "Well, then I think my timing is perfect. How about real pasta with a sauce that didn't come from a jar?" That would be wonderful, Jack said, finding his voice at last. But you didn't need to go to all this trouble. Elizabeth began unpacking the groceries. Pasta, fresh vegetables, herbs, a bottle of good olive oil, even a carton of premium ice cream for dessert. It's no trouble, I don't get to cook as often as I'd like. Too many business dinners. She rolled up her sleeves. May I use your kitchen? Of course, Jack said, still slightly bewildered by this domestic version of the powerful CEO. Let me wash up first. When he returned from changing into clean clothes, Jack found Elizabeth chopping vegetables with surprising skill. Emma perched on a stool beside her, carefully tearing lettuce leaves for a salad. The scene was so unexpectedly normal. Two people cooking in his kitchen, the apartment filled with the aroma of garlic and olive oil, that Jack felt a momentary disorientation, as if he'd stepped into someone else's life. Can I help? He offered. Elizabeth pointed with her knife to the grocery bag. There's a bottle of wine in there if you'd like to open it, and maybe set the table. For the next hour, they worked together in the small kitchen, moving around each other with the careful choreography that confined spaces require. Elizabeth was an accomplished cook. Jack discovered her movements efficient and practiced. This wasn't a skill acquired for show. She genuinely knew her way around a kitchen. When they finally sat down to eat, fresh pasta with a tomato sauce rich with herbs and simmered to perfection, Jack decided to address the elephant in the room. Not that this isn't a wonderful surprise, he said carefully, but I'm guessing there's more to this visit than gratitude for helping Ethan. Elizabeth twirled pasta around her fork, considering her response. You're right, of course, though the gratitude is absolutely genuine. She set her fork down. I have a business proposition for you, Jack. A business proposition? Jack repeated, his tone revealing his skepticism. Reynolds Technologies has a program called New Beginnings, she explained. We identify veterans with specific skills and provide capital for them to start or expand their own businesses. Then we contract with those businesses for services. That's commendable, Jack said cautiously. It's practical, Elizabeth countered. We get reliable service providers who understand security and discretion, and veterans get opportunities often denied them in the traditional job market. She held his gaze. After we met, I did some research on you. Your service record is impressive, even with the redacted sections. Jack stiffened slightly. Those records aren't easily accessible. No, they're not, Elizabeth agreed without apology. But when you have government contracts at the level we do, certain doors open. She leaned forward slightly. What impressed me more was what you did after your service. How you raised your daughter alone after your wife passed. How you've stepped up for Emma. Her voice softened. How you built a life of dignity and purpose, despite circumstances that would have broken many people. Jack remained silent, uncomfortable with both the invasion of privacy and the unexpected praise. Elizabeth reached into her bag and withdrew a folder. I want to back you, Jack. Fund you. Help you establish your own HVAC company rather than working for others. Why Boyjave? The question was direct, stripped of pretense. Because when my son was lost and afraid, you were the only one who stopped to help, Elizabeth replied with equal directness. In a station full of people, you were the one who saw a child in need and acted. That says something about who you are. She pushed the folder across the table. And I believe in investing in good people. Jack didn't reach for the folder. What's the catch? Elizabeth's blue eyes, so like her son's, held steady. The only catch is that you believe in yourself enough to accept help when it's offered, and that Reynolds Properties would be your first maintenance contracts. That's it. That's it, she confirmed. Look through the proposal. Take your time. It's a legitimate offer, Jack. No strings attached. Before Jack could respond, Emma spoke up from her end of the table. Does this mean Grandpa wouldn't have to work so late and could fix our bathroom that's always cold? Elizabeth smiled at the practical concerns of a 5-year-old. It would mean your grandfather could set his own hours, hire people to help him, and yes, fix your bathroom. Jack finally reached for the folder, opening it to find detailed business plans, financial projections, incorporation papers already drafted, and a bank statement showing a $250,000 grant approval pending his signature. This is substantial, he said, paging through the documents. It's what's needed to establish a proper business, Elizabeth replied. Equipment, van insurance, initial operating expenses. It's an investment, not charity. Jack closed the fold, his mind racing with possibilities and questions. I need time to think about this. Of course, Elizabeth agreed immediately. Take all the time you need. She pulled a business card from her pocket, different from the one she'd given him at the station. This one had her direct number written on the back in blue ink. Call me when you have made a decision. After dinner, Elizabeth helped clean up, despite Jack's protests, then prepared to leave. At the door, she paused. There's a foundation gala this Friday at the Omni William Penn, she said. I'd be honored if you and Emma would attend as my guests. No pressure about the business proposal. This is a separate invitation. A gala, Jack echoed, trying to imagine himself and Emma in such a setting. It's for a good cause. The Reynolds Foundation funds educational programs for underserved communities in Pittsburgh. Elizabeth smiled. Emma might enjoy seeing how the other half lives, and Ethan would love to see her again. Against his better judgment, Jack found himself accepting. Elizabeth's smile widened. Wonderful. I'll send a car for you at 7. And don't worry about attire. I'll take care of that too. She turned to Emma, who had been listening intently. How do you feel about princess dresses, Emma? Emma's eyes grew round. Real princess dresses. The fanciest? Elizabeth promised, with sparkles. After she left, Jack sat at the kitchen table, staring at the folder containing a potential new future. Emma climbed into his lap, looking up with serious eyes. I like her grandpa, she declared. She makes good spaghetti, and she doesn't talk to me like I'm a baby. Those are excellent qualities, Jack agreed, smiling. Are you going to say yes to her business thing? Jack sighed, smoothing Emma's hair. I don't know yet, sunshine. It's complicated. Why don't you want your own company? It's not that simple, Jack tried to explain. When someone offers you something that seems too good to be true, it usually is. Emma considered this with the straightforward logic of a child. But sometimes good things just happen, right? Like how I got to live with you even though it's sad about Mommy. Jack's throat tightened from the mouths of babes. Yes, sometimes good things do happen, he conceded, even from sad beginnings. So maybe this is a good thing happening, Emma concluded with satisfaction. From when that little boy got lost. Jack hugged her close, wondering when his granddaughter had become so wise. Maybe you're right, sunshine. Maybe you're right. That night, after Emma was asleep, Jack examined the business proposal in detail. The terms were remarkably favorable. The grant didn't require repayment unless he sold the business within 5 years. The initial contracts with Reynolds Properties would provide stable income, and the structure gave him complete operational control. He also researched the New Beginnings program and found it was legitimate. Dozens of veteran-owned businesses had been established through it over the past 5 years with an impressive success rate. Still, questions nagged at him. Why him specifically? Was this truly just about helping Ethan? Or did Elizabeth Reynolds have other motives she hadn't shared as he stared out the window at Pittsburgh's nighttime skyline? Jack couldn't shake the feeling that he was standing at a crossroads. The safe path was to continue as he had been, working for others, making enough to get by, providing Emma with a stable, if modest, life. The other path offered potential prosperity, but unknown complications. What tipped the balance finally was thinking about Emma's future. The opportunity to build something that could provide for her education, that could be a legacy beyond his pension and savings. That was something he couldn't dismiss out of hand. Well, Sarah, he said softly to his daughter's photograph, what would you tell your old man to do? He could almost hear her practical voice. Take the deal, Dad, but read the fine print. With a small smile, Jack decided he would accept Elizabeth's offer, cautiously with eyes wide open to whatever complications might arise. After all, he'd faced worse odds in the desert 30 years ago and come through standing. What he couldn't possibly know was that his decision would entangle him not just in a new business venture, but in a web of danger and intrigue surrounding Elizabeth Reynolds and her enigmatic former head of security, a man named Marcus Grant, who had very specific reasons for wanting Jack Miller out of the picture permanently. The midnight blue dress arrived on Friday morning, delivered in a white box tied with silver ribbon. Emma's gasp of delight when she opened it echoed through the apartment, her small hands reverently touching the sparkling fabric as if it might dissolve at her touch. It's like the stars, Grandpa, she exclaimed, holding the dress against herself and twirling. The accompanying silver shoes and a delicate bracelet with a tiny star charm only heightened her excitement. Jack's own package contained a tailored black suit that somehow fit his frame perfectly, along with a crisp white shirt and a blue tie that matched Emma's dress. A note in elegant handwriting read simply, "No arguments about the clothes. See you tonight. E." As they rode in the sleek town car Elizabeth had sent, not the security-heavy Escalade from before, but a more discreet Lincoln with a professional driver. Jack fought against his natural discomfort with accepting such generosity. Emma, however, had no such reservations. She sat beside him in her finery legs, swinging periodically, touching her bracelet as if to confirm it was real. "Do you think there will be a princess at the party?" she asked, her fifth variation on the question since they'd left the apartment. "Elizabeth isn't technically a princess," Jack explained again, "but she's probably the closest thing Pittsburgh has to one. Because she's rich. Because she helps people," Jack corrected gently. "Real royalty isn't about money, Emma. It's about how you treat others." Emma considered this seriously. "Like how you helped Ethan." "Exactly like that." The Omni William Penn Hotel stood as a testament to Pittsburgh's early 20th century prosperity. 16 stories of Italian Renaissance architecture crowned with ornate terracotta detailing. Built in 1916 when steel money flowed freely through the city, it had hosted presidents, celebrities, and dignitaries for over a century. Tonight, its grand ballroom would showcase the Reynolds Foundation's most significant supporters and partners. The lobby alone spoke of another era. There's marble floors, crystal chandeliers, gilded moldings, and a massive central staircase that ascended in twin curving flights. Emma's eyes widened as she took in the splendor, her small hand tightening around Jack's. "It's like a castle," she whispered. "Sure is." Jack agreed, feeling decidedly out of place despite his new suit. A young woman in a black evening dress approached them, tablet in hand. "Mr. Miller, I'm Sophia, Ms. Reynolds' assistant. She asked me to escort you personally." Her gaze shifted to Emma with a genuine smile. "And this must be the famous Emma. Elizabeth has told me all about you." Emma beamed at being recognized while Jack filed away another note. Elizabeth's staff had been briefed about them. Sophia led them through the lobby toward the grand ballroom, passing clusters of Pittsburgh's elite in formal attire. Jack caught snippets of conversation. Stock prices, property developments, political connections, the casual commerce of wealth and influence. The ballroom itself seemed designed to intimidate with its soaring ceiling, massive crystal chandeliers, and gilt detailing. A string quartet played something classical that Jack couldn't identify but recognized as expensive. Roughly 200 people circulated through the space champagne flutes in hand jewelry, catching the light like captured stars. "Overwhelming, isn't it?" Sophia commented, noting Jack's expression. "Don't worry, Elizabeth doesn't care for all this pomp either. It's necessary for fundraising, nothing more." Before Jack could respond, a hush fell over the room. All eyes turned toward the main staircase where Elizabeth Reynolds had appeared, a vision in a black silk gown with intricate silver threadwork that caught the light with every movement. Her dark hair fell in soft waves past her shoulders, and a simple diamond pendant at her throat was her only jewelry. Unlike many of the women present, she wore her wealth with understated confidence rather than ostentatious display. What struck Jack most, however, was how she scanned the crowd, not with the practiced smile of a hostess, but with the focused gaze of someone looking for a specific face. When her eyes found his, her entire demeanor changed. The tension in her shoulders eased, and her smile transformed from professional to genuine. She descended the stairs with graceful efficiency, moving directly toward them through the parting crowd. "You came," she said simply when she reached them, as if his presence had been uncertain. "You invited us," Jack replied with a slight smile. Elizabeth knelt to Emma's level, her expensive gown pooling around her on the ballroom floor without a second thought. "You look absolutely beautiful, Emma." "Thank you for the dress," Emma replied, suddenly shy in the presence of such elegance. "And the shoes. And the bracelet." "You're very welcome. I'm so glad you like them." Elizabeth straightened, turning to Jack. "And you clean up rather well yourself, Mr. Miller." "The suit helps," Jack admitted, "though I feel a bit like I'm in costume." Elizabeth's eyes showed appreciation for his honesty. Most people here would sooner die than admit they're uncomfortable. She glanced around at the assembled guests. There's something refreshing about someone who doesn't pretend. A server approached with a tray of champagne flutes. Elizabeth took two, handing one to Jack. I have to make the rounds, but I'd like you to meet some people first. Important people. Jack accepted the champagne but didn't drink. I'm not much for networking. This isn't networking, Elizabeth said, her voice dropping lower. This is giving you allies. People who can help with your new venture, assuming you're still considering my offer. I am, Jack confirmed. The proposal is solid, but I still have questions. Of course you do, and I'll answer all of them after the formalities. Elizabeth turned to Sophia. Would you mind taking Emma to meet Ethan? He's in the children's area with his tutor. Sophia nodded, offering her hand to Emma. They have an ice cream sundae bar, she confided, which was all the persuasion Emma needed. As they walked away, Jack felt a momentary pang of protective instinct, but forced himself to focus on Elizabeth, who was already guiding him toward a group of distinguished-looking men near a columned archway. Jack Miller, Elizabeth said as they approached. I'd like you to meet Richard Harrington, president of the Pittsburgh Commerce Bank, and Thomas Westfield, director of urban development for the city. The introductions continued as Elizabeth smoothly integrated Jack into conversations with key figures in Pittsburgh's business and civic landscape. He recognized her strategy, establishing him as someone under her personal protection, someone to be taken seriously despite his lack of credentials or connections. It was skillfully done, and Jack found himself grateful for her efforts even as he maintained his natural reserve. After nearly an hour of these carefully orchestrated introductions, Elizabeth guided Jack toward a quieter corner of the ballroom. You've been very patient, she observed. Most people would be overwhelmed by now. I've been in more stressful situations, Jack replied dryly, though none with quite so many different folks at the dinner table. Elizabeth laughed, a genuine sound that momentarily drew attention from nearby guests, clearly surprised to see the normally composed CEO so relaxed. You start from the outside and work your way in, she advised. But honestly, I've always thought it was ridiculous too. A comfortable silence fell between them both, watching the glittering crowd from their relative sanctuary. Jack took the opportunity to ask the question that had been on his mind. Why me, Elizabeth, really? There must be dozens of veterans with better business credentials, better connections. Why choose a middle-aged HVAC repairman to invest in? Elizabeth considered him for a long moment. Because you remind me of my father, she finally said, her voice softer now. He built Reynolds Technologies from nothing. No connections, no inherited wealth, just intelligence and uncompromising integrity. She turned to face Jack fully. Do you know what the hardest thing about inheriting a billion-dollar company is? Jack shook his head. Finding people you can trust, she said simply. People who see you as a person, not a walking checkbook or a stepping stone to their own ambitions. Her gaze was direct, unflinching. When you helped Ethan, you had no idea who I was. You acted out of simple human decency. Do you have any idea how rare that is in my world? Jack absorbed her words, recognizing the loneliness beneath them. I imagine it's difficult to know who your real friends are. Almost impossible, Elizabeth agreed, but I've gotten very good at reading people. And you, Jack Miller, are exactly what you appear to be. A good man who's had his share of hardships but hasn't let them corrupt his essential nature. She smiled slightly. Also, you're exceptionally good with antiquated HVAC systems, and I happen to own several historic buildings that need exactly that expertise. Before Jack could respond, they were interrupted by the arrival of a distinguished elderly man using a silver-headed cane. His tailored tuxedo hung slightly loose on his thin frame, suggesting recent weight loss, but his posture remained impeccable. Elizabeth, my dear, he said, his voice carrying the refined cadence of old Pittsburgh money. Won't you introduce me to your guest? Professor Mitchell, Elizabeth replied warmly. I was hoping you'd be here tonight. This is Jack Miller, a friend and soon-to-be business associate. Jack, this is Howard Mitchell, Professor Emeritus of Engineering at Carnegie Mellon and my father's oldest friend. A pleasure, sir, Jack said, shaking the older man's hand and noting both the strength of his grip and the assessing intelligence in his eyes. Miller, Mitchell repeated as if testing the name. Military background, Jack nodded. Army, Gulf War. Thought so. You carry yourself like a soldier. Mitchell turned to Elizabeth. Your father would approve, my dear. He always said you could tell everything about a man by how he carries himself when no one important is watching. Elizabeth's expression softened at the mention of her father. He did say that, didn't he? Jack, Professor Mitchell knew my father better than anyone. They were roommates at MIT. Samuel Reynolds was the most brilliant mind I ever encountered. Mitchell said, a note of genuine admiration in his voice. And the most decent. His loss has left a void in many lives. He turned to Jack. Are you familiar with his work? Only by reputation, Jack admitted. I know he transformed Reynolds Technologies from an engineering firm to a leader in clean energy. Mitchell nodded approvingly. Indeed, but his true legacy is less visible. Samuel believed technology should serve humanity, not the other way around. A refreshing perspective in an age of profit-driven innovation. He glanced at Elizabeth. His daughter continues that tradition, despite pressure from less visionary board members. Elizabeth touched the professor's arm gently. You'll make Jack think I'm some kind of corporate saint, which I assure you I am not. No, but you are your father's daughter, Mitchell replied with obvious affection. His gaze shifted back to Jack, becoming more measured. Mr. Miller, would you indulge an old man with a few minutes of conversation? I rarely get to speak with veterans these days. Elizabeth seemed to understand some subtext to this request. I should check on the children anyway. Jack, I'll find you afterward. As she departed, Mitchell guided Jack toward a small alcove off the main ballroom, his cane tapping softly against the polished floor. When they were relatively private, the older man's demeanor changed subtly, the genteel academic giving way to something more alert, more focused. Ms. Reynolds has taken quite an interest in you, Mitchell observed, his tone neutral, but his eyes sharp. So it seems, Jack agreed cautiously. May I speak frankly, Mr. Miller? I prefer it, sir. Mitchell nodded, seeming to approve of the response. Elizabeth Reynolds is one of the finest people I know. Brilliant like her father, but with a compassion that's rare in people of her position and power. He leaned slightly on his cane. She's also in considerable danger, though she won't fully admit it to herself. Jack's posture straightened imperceptibly, military instincts engaging. What kind of danger? The kind that comes from knowing too much, Mitchell replied cryptically. Or more specifically, from possessing what others desperately want. He studied Jack's face. Has she mentioned Marcus Grant to you? No, Jack said, the name unfamiliar to him. Former head of security for Reynolds Technologies. Resigned about 8 months ago under questionable circumstances. Mitchell's expression darkened. Grant worked closely with Samuel before his death. Had access to everything, including Samuel's personal research, much of which never became part of the company's official portfolio. Jack processed this information, noting both what was said and what remained unspoken. You're suggesting Grant took something when he left. Not suggesting, Mr. Miller, stating. Mitchell's voice hardened. Intellectual property, certainly, but also something more tangible. A prototype that Samuel developed in the final year of his life. Something that could revolutionize energy storage if used properly, or become extremely dangerous in the wrong hands. And you think Grant is a threat to Elizabeth because of this? Mitchell nodded gravely. He's made demands. Threats. Nothing that can be traced back to him, of course. He's too clever for that. But Elizabeth has received warnings that only someone with intimate knowledge of her security protocols could deliver. Jack's mind was working rapidly now, connecting dots. Is that why she approached me? She thinks I can help protect her. A thin smile crossed Mitchell's face. Not exactly, though. I imagine your military background doesn't hurt. No, I believe she genuinely wants to help you establish your business. But I also believe she's drawn to people she instinctively trusts. And right now, she needs trustworthy people around her. He leaned closer, especially around Ethan. Jack felt a cold certainty settle in his stomach. Grant has threatened her son, not explicitly, but in this world, Mr. Miller, the most effective threats are often the ones left unspoken. Mitchell straightened, wincing slightly as if the movement caused pain. I'm telling you this because Elizabeth won't. She's fiercely independent, determined to handle her problems alone. A trait inherited from her father, I'm afraid. Why tell me at all? Jack asked directly. I'm just a repairman she met by chance. Mitchell's gaze was penetrating. Are you, Mr. Miller, just a repairman? Or are you someone who understands duty, honor, and the obligation to protect those who cannot protect themselves? He didn't wait for an answer. I've studied people my entire life, son, and I recognize capability when I see it. Before Jack could respond, a commotion near the ballroom entrance drew their attention. A man in an impeccably tailored suit had entered his presence, causing an immediate ripple through the crowd. Tall with sharp features and the confident bearing of someone accustomed to command, he moved through the space with predatory grace. "Speak of the devil," Mitchell murmured. "Marcus Grant. I'm surprised he had the audacity to show his face here." Jack studied the newcomer with professional assessment. Grant moved like someone with military or law enforcement training, balanced, aware, constantly scanning. Their eyes met briefly across the room, and Jack felt a chill of recognition. Not of the man himself, but of the type. He'd encountered men like Grant in special operations. Highly competent, utterly ruthless when required. Elizabeth had emerged from a side door, her composed expression betrayed only by the slight tension in her shoulders as she approached Grant. Though Jack couldn't hear their conversation, the body language spoke volumes, Grant leaning in slightly, invading her space. Elizabeth maintaining her ground, refusing to be intimidated. "I should join her," Jack said, already moving. Mitchell caught his arm with surprising strength. "Not yet. Elizabeth knows what she's doing. Confronting Grant publicly is her strategy. He can't risk making a scene here surrounded by Pittsburgh's elite and their security details, sus." He released Jack's arm. "But perhaps we should move closer just in case." They made their way toward Elizabeth and Grant, arriving just as the latter was preparing to leave. Jack caught the tail end of their conversation. "Reconsider my offer, Elizabeth," Grant was saying, his voice cultured, but with an underlying hardness. "Some things are better kept within the family, so to speak." "There is no offer to consider, Marcus," Elizabeth replied coolly. "My father's work belongs at Reynolds Technologies. End of discussion." Grant's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Nothing ever ends, Elizabeth. It merely evolves." His gaze shifted to Jack as he approached, a flicker of curiosity crossing his features. "New security detail. Not really up to your usual standards, is he?" "Jack Miller," Jack introduced himself, extending his hand more as a challenge than a greeting. "Friend of the family." Grant accepted the handshake, his grip deliberately testing. "Marcus Grant, former friend of the family, apparently." He held Jack's gaze a beat too long. "Military. Once upon a time," Jack acknowledged, not breaking eye contact. "Interesting." Grant released his hand, turning back to Elizabeth. "We'll continue our discussion another time in a more private setting." He nodded toward Mitchell. "Professor, still fighting the lost causes, I see." "Some causes are worth fighting for, Mr. Grant," Mitchell replied evenly, "even when the odds seem insurmountable." Grant's mouth twitched in what might have been amusement or annoyance. "Indeed." With a final nod to Elizabeth, he departed, moving through the crowd with the same confident stride. Elizabeth watched him go, her expression unreadable. Only when he had fully exited did she turn to Mitchell. "You told him." It wasn't a question, but Mitchell answered anyway. "He deserved to know what he's potentially walking into." "That wasn't your decision to make, Howard." "No, it was yours," Mitchell countered gently, "but you weren't making it." Elizabeth sighed, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. "I had my reasons." "You always do, my dear." Mitchell patted her arm. "Now, if you'll excuse me, these old legs need a rest before the speeches begin." As Mitchell moved away, Elizabeth turned to Jack, her professional mask momentarily slipping to reveal genuine concern. "I'm sorry about that. Marcus has a talent for disruption." "Seems like more than a disgruntled ex-employee," Jack observed. Elizabeth glanced around, ensuring they weren't overheard. "It's complicated, and not something I intended to burden you with." She met his gaze directly. "Howard means well, but he tends to see threats around every corner these days." "Is he wrong about Grant?" A slight hesitation. "No," she admitted. "Marcus is problematic, but it's a corporate matter, not something that should concern you." Jack considered pushing the issue, but recognized the walls being erected. Instead, he changed direction. "Where are the children?" Relief flashed across Elizabeth's face at the topic change. "In the family lounge upstairs. Sos, Ethan was teaching Emma chess when I last checked. Would you like to see them?" Jack nodded, and they made their way through the crowd toward a discreet elevator at the back of the ballroom. As they walked, Jack noticed Grant hadn't actually left the gala. He was standing near the main entrance, watching them with undisguised interest. The family lounge on the mezzanine level was a stark contrast to the formal ballroom. Comfortable furniture, subdued lighting, and various entertainment options for children whose parents were attending events downstairs. Emma and Ethan sat at a small table, a chessboard between them, both concentrating intensely on the game. Knight takes bishop, Emma announced triumphantly, making her move. Ethan studied the board with a frown that mimicked his mother's expression when deep in thought. But now my queen can take your knight, he countered, executing the move. I know, Emma replied with the confidence of someone who had planned ahead. But now my pawn can take your queen. Ethan's eyes widened as he saw the trap. How did I miss that? Elizabeth laughed softly beside Jack. Your daughter taught her well, she murmured. Sarah loved chess, Jack confirmed, a bittersweet memory surfacing. Played with Emma from the time she could recognize the pieces. The children looked up at the sound of their voices, both faces lighting with matching smiles. Grandpa, I'm winning, Emma exclaimed. Mom, she's really good, Ethan added with genuine admiration. Jack and Elizabeth exchanged a glance, sharing a moment of simple parental pride that transcended their different worlds. For that brief instance, they were just two people delighting in their children's joy. The speeches will be starting soon, Elizabeth said after a moment. I have to give the foundation address. She turned to Jack. Would you mind staying with the children? I'll send Sophia to bring you all down for dessert afterward. Of course, Jack agreed. As Elizabeth prepared to leave, Ethan suddenly spoke up. Mom, is the bad man gone? A flash of concern crossed Elizabeth's face. What bad man, sweetie? The one who was watching us at home yesterday, Ethan said simply. The one who used to work with Grandpa Samuel. Elizabeth knelt beside her son, her voice gentle but urgent. Ethan, what are you talking about? Did you see someone watching the house? Ethan nodded. From the black car. He had a camera with a long tube on it. Jack recognized the description of a telephoto lens. Elizabeth's expression hardened momentarily before she smoothed it into reassurance. It was probably just paparazzi, honey. Nothing to worry about. She kissed his forehead. Stay with Mr. Miller and Emma. Okay, I'll be back soon. As Elizabeth left, Jack settled into a chair near the children, his mind processing this new information. Grant wasn't just making business threats. He was conducting surveillance on Elizabeth's home where her child lived. The situation was escalating from corporate espionage to something more personal and potentially dangerous. Mr. Miller, Ethan said, interrupting Jack's thoughts. Do you know how to stop bad people? The directness of the question caught Jack off guard. Sometimes, he answered carefully. Why do you ask? Because the man in the car looked at me like I was something he wanted to take, Ethan replied with disturbing insight for a 5-year-old. And he makes Mom scared even if she pretends she's not. Jack felt a protective instinct surge within him, not just for Emma now, but for this perceptive boy who sensed more than the adults around him realized. Has your mom talked to the police about this man? Ethan shook his head. She says it's complicated because he knows things. He turned his attention back to the chessboard. Your move, Emma. The children resumed their game, the moment of seriousness passing as quickly as it had arrived. Jack watched them play his military mind, already cataloging potential threats and countermeasures. Whatever Elizabeth's reasons for keeping Grant's threats to herself, the stakes had clearly risen now that children were involved. After about 20 minutes, Sophia arrived to escort them downstairs for the dessert reception. As they prepared to leave, Jack noticed Ethan carefully packing away the chess pieces, ensuring each one was in its proper place in the wooden box. My grandpa Samuel gave me this set, he explained when he caught Jack watching. He said chess teaches you how to think ahead, to see the whole board. Your grandpa was right, Jack agreed. It's good to see the whole board. But sometimes people hide pieces, Ethan added, with that same unsettling perception. That makes it harder. Jack helped Emma with her shoes, which had come slightly loose during play. Then you have to work with the information you have and be ready to adjust when new pieces appear. Ethan considered this, then nodded seriously. I think that's what Mom is trying to do. Downstairs, the formal program had concluded, and the ballroom had been transformed for dessert and dancing. Elizabeth was surrounded by well-wishers graciously accepting compliments on her speech, which Jack had missed. She caught his eye across the room and gave a small nod of acknowledgement. Shall we get some of that chocolate fountain? Jack suggested to the children, spotting an elaborate dessert display. As they navigated toward the dessert table, Jack felt a presence beside him. Marcus Grant had appeared seemingly from nowhere, his attention focused on Ethan. Hello, young man, Grant said, his voice carefully modulated to sound friendly. Remember me? I used to work with your mother. Ethan moved closer to Jack, his small body tensing. I remember. Grant smiled, though the expression didn't reach his eyes. Smart boy, just like your grandfather. His gaze shifted to Jack. Mr. Miller, isn't it quite the coincidence you connecting with the Reynolds family so fortuitously? No coincidence, Jack replied evenly. Just being in the right place at the right time. Indeed, Grant's attention returned to Ethan. Your mother's speech was quite moving, all about continuing your grandfather's legacy, though I sometimes wonder if she truly understands what that legacy entails. He reached out as if to touch Ethan's shoulder. Jack smoothly intercepted, placing himself between Grant and the children. The kids were just heading for dessert, if you'll excuse us. Grant withdrew his hand, his expression hardening fractionally before resuming its practiced charm. Of course. Children and their sweets, a timeless combination. He produced a business card offering it to Jack. When you're ready for a more complete picture of the Reynolds family and their enterprises, call me. I think you'd find it enlightening. Jack accepted the card without comment, guiding the children away toward the dessert table. As they departed, he felt Grant's gaze following them across the room. The remainder of the evening passed without further incident. Elizabeth rejoined them for dessert, skillfully integrating Jack and Emma into conversations with foundation donors while keeping the topics light and accessible. To casual observers, they might have appeared to be old friends rather than recent acquaintances. As the gala wound down, Elizabeth arranged for her driver to take them home. In the quiet privacy of the car, Emma fell asleep against Jack's side, exhausted from the excitement and sugar. She's wonderful, Elizabeth said softly, watching Emma sleep. So bright and resilient. She's had to be, Jack replied, gently stroking his granddaughter's hair. Elizabeth was quiet for a moment, then spoke with careful precision. I saw you speaking with Marcus earlier. He approached us at the dessert table, Jack confirmed. Seemed particularly interested in Ethan. A flash of alarm crossed Elizabeth's face before she controlled it. What did he say? Nothing explicit, but Ethan was uncomfortable around him. Jack met her gaze directly. Elizabeth, what's really going on here? Mitchell mentioned intellectual property, a prototype, but this feels more personal than corporate espionage. Elizabeth sighed, the composed CEO momentarily giving way to a worried mother. It is personal. Marcus worked closely with my father for years. After my father died, Marcus expected to be given control of certain research projects. Projects my father had kept separate from the main company. Her voice hardened. When I refused, he resigned, taking sensitive information with him. He's been pressuring me ever since to sell him the rights to my father's final project. What kind of project? An energy storage system unlike anything currently available, Elizabeth replied after a moment's hesitation. My father called it legacy. It could revolutionize how we power everything from homes to vehicles to entire cities. She looked out the window at the passing cityscape. But it's not ready yet. The prototype is unstable, potentially dangerous if misused. And Grant wants it anyway. He wants to sell it to the highest bidder, regardless of their intentions. Her gaze returned to Jack. My father believed technology should improve lives, not endanger them. I won't betray that principle, no matter how much pressure Marcus applies. Jack absorbed this information, filling in gaps in the puzzle. Has he threatened you directly? Not in ways that could be proven, Elizabeth admitted. Strange phone calls, security breaches at my home that somehow evade detection. And now, apparently, surveillance. She glanced at Emma's sleeping form. I never intended to involve you in this, Jack. The business proposal is genuine, completely separate from my issues with Marcus. I believe you, Jack said, surprised to realize he meant it. But I'm involved now, whether either of us intended it or not. Elizabeth studied him for a long moment. What did you tell your commanding officers when they asked why you enlisted Jack? The question seemed like a non sequitur, but Jack answered anyway. That I wanted to be part of something bigger than myself, to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. She nodded as if confirming something she'd already suspected. Some motivations don't change even when the battlefield does. Her hand moved to her throat, touching the diamond pendant she wore. I should warn you, if you accept my business proposal, Marcus will see you as an extension of me, a potential pressure point. I've dealt with men like Grant before, Jack replied. his voice hardening slightly with the memory of past confrontations. They mistake kindness for weakness, principle for vulnerability. And what do you consider it? Strength, Jack said simply. The only kind worth having. The car pulled up outside Commonwealth Plaza. As Jack gathered the sleeping Emma in his arms, Elizabeth touched his arm lightly. Think about what I've said before you make your final decision about the business. I'd understand completely if you declined. Jack shifted Emma's weight, looking down at his granddaughter's peaceful face. I'll let you know by Monday, he promised. Whatever you decide, Elizabeth said. Thank you for tonight. It's been a relief, having someone I can trust nearby. As Jack carried Emma into their building, he reflected on the evening's revelations. What had begun as a simple act of kindness, helping a lost boy find his mother, had evolved into something far more complex. Elizabeth Reynolds was fighting a battle that went beyond corporate politics, and somehow Jack had been drawn into her orbit. Grant's business card seemed to burn in his pocket, an alternative perspective, being offered a different version of the truth. Jack had learned long ago that most conflicts involve competing truths rather than simple right and wrong. The question was which truth aligned with his own principles. After settling Emma in bed, still in her princess dress, at her drowsy insistence, Jack sat at his small desk and laid out both business cards side by side. Elizabeth's elegant simplicity contrasting with Grant's bold, aggressive styling. Two paths diverging before him, each with its own complications and consequences. His decision when it came wasn't based on business prospects or potential danger, but on a much simpler metric: who had demonstrated genuine care for others, who had put the welfare of children first. By that measure, there was no contest. Jack reached for his phone and dialed Elizabeth's private number. She answered on the second ring. I'm in, he said, without preamble, for the business and whatever else comes with it. Jack, Elizabeth's voice carried both gratitude and concern. Are you certain for everything I told you? Because of everything you told me, he corrected. I've spent too much of my life on the sidelines, Elizabeth, fixing things instead of building them. It's time for that to change. The silence on the line stretched for several seconds before Elizabeth responded. Thank you, she said simply, the words carrying weight beyond their simplicity. I'll sign the papers Monday, Jack confirmed. Miller Mechanical Services has a nice ring to it. Yes, it does, Elizabeth agreed, warmth entering her voice. Get some rest, Jack. I have a feeling we're both going to need it in the days ahead. After they disconnected, Jack moved to the window overlooking the city. Pittsburgh spread before him, a patchwork of lights against the dark hills, the rivers cutting black ribbons through the urban landscape. Somewhere out there, Marcus Grant was likely planning his next move, seeing Jack now as a new variable in his equation. Let him, Jack thought with quiet determination. Some things were worth protecting, worth fighting for. A principle he'd lived by in the desert 30 years ago, and one that still defined him now. Elizabeth Reynolds and her son had become part of that equation, joining Emma all in the circle of people Jack considered under his protection. Miller Mechanical Services would be more than just a business. It would be a new beginning, a purpose beyond daily survival. And if that beginning came with complications and potential danger, well, Jack Miller had never been one to choose the easy path. As he turned from the window, his gaze fell on the photograph of Sarah. What do you think, kid? He asked softly. Your old man getting mixed up in billion-dollar corporate intrigue. He could almost hear her practical, optimistic voice. About time you had an adventure, Dad. Just watch your six. With a small smile, Jack made a silent promise to do exactly that. Whatever Marcus Grant was planning, whatever threat he posed to Elizabeth and Ethan, Jack would be ready. The game had begun, and like Ethan's chess set, all the pieces were now on the board. What Jack couldn't possibly know was how quickly the game would escalate, or that by Monday morning both children would be in grave danger, forcing him to fall back on skills he hadn't used in decades, and testing his newfound alliance with Elizabeth Reynolds in ways neither of them could anticipate. Monday dawned with a bitter wind that carried the last bite of winter, despite the calendar's insistence that spring had arrived. Jack stood at his apartment window, coffee in hand, watching the first light illuminate Pittsburgh's skyline. Today he would sign the papers to establish Miller Mechanical Services, the beginning of a new chapter that both excited and unsettled him. Emma was still asleep, exhausted from the weekend's adventures. After the gala, she had talked of little else besides Ethan and Elizabeth and the magical evening of feeling like a real princess. Jack had indulged her excitement while quietly contemplating the complications his new business association might bring. His phone vibrated on the counter, a text from Elizabeth confirming their 10 a.m. meeting at Reynolds Technologies headquarters downtown. Jack had arranged for Emma to spend the day with Mrs. Patterson, her kindergarten teacher, who occasionally helped with childcare. A normal Monday following what should have been a normal weekend, except for the nagging sense of watchfulness that had settled over Jack since his conversations with Mitchell and Elizabeth. Twice yesterday, he had noticed a dark sedan parked across from their building, disappearing whenever he appeared to approach it. Old instincts long dormant but never forgotten had kicked in. Jack had discreetly photographed the vehicle and memorized what he could see of the driver. Male baseball cap sunglasses despite the cloudy day. Amateur surveillance, but concerning nonetheless. Jack was preparing Emma's lunch when his phone rang. A Pittsburgh area code, but not a number he recognized. Miller, he answered, balancing the phone while cutting Emma's sandwich into the triangles she preferred. Miller, Howard Mitchell. The professor's voice sounded strained, pitched lower than at the gala. I apologize for calling so early, but I needed to reach you before your meeting with Elizabeth. Jack set down the knife, his attention sharpening. What's wrong, Professor? I'm not entirely sure, Mitchell admitted, but certain patterns have emerged that concern me. Would it be possible to meet briefly before your appointment with Elizabeth, say 9 a.m., at the Cathedral of Learning coffee shop? I can make that work, Jack agreed, glancing at the clock. Should I be concerned? A hesitation. Let's just say caution is warranted. I've been reviewing some of Samuel's old research notes. There are references to contingency plans that don't align with what Elizabeth has told me about legacy. Mitchell's voice lowered further. I believe Samuel may have built safeguards into the system that even Elizabeth doesn't know about. And this is urgent because Marcus Grant has been making inquiries about you, Mr. Miller. Quite detailed inquiries from what my sources tell me. Jack felt a cold certainty settle in his stomach. I'll be there at 9. After hanging up, Jack moved through the apartment with renewed vigilance, checking locks and sightlines with the methodical thoroughness of his military days. If Grant was investigating him, standard precautions were warranted. He woke Emma gently, helping her dress and prepare for the day with casual efficiency that masked his heightened alert status. Can I wear my princess bracelet to school? Emma asked as she finished her breakfast. Of course, sunshine, Jack agreed, securing the star charm that hadn't left her wrist since Friday night. Just be careful not to lose it during recess. I won't, she promised solemnly. It's special because Ethan's mom gave it to me. Jack smiled at her attachment to the simple gift, even as he calculated timing and routes in his head. They would need to leave earlier than usual to accommodate his meeting with Mitchell. He packed Emma's lunch, double-checked her backpack, and grabbed his own satchel containing the business documents Elizabeth had sent over for review. The walk to Emma's school was uneventful, though Jack maintained a subtle awareness of their surroundings that Emma, chattering about her weekend, didn't notice. Mrs. Patterson greeted them warmly at the classroom door. Emma's been telling everyone about her princess dress, she confided to Jack with a smile, and her new friend Ethan. It was quite an evening, Jack acknowledged. Thanks again for taking her after school today. I should be done by 4. Take your time, Mrs. Patterson assured him. We'll be baking cookies in the afternoon. Emma can help. With Emma safely delivered, Jack headed toward the University of Pittsburgh campus home to the Cathedral of Learning, a 42-story Gothic revival tower that dominated Oakland's skyline. The coffee shop on the ground floor was popular with students and faculty alike, offering relative anonymity amidst academic bustle. Mitchell was already there when Jack arrived, seated at a corner table with his silver-headed cane propped beside him. 2 coffee cups waited on the table. The professor looked more tired than he had at the gala, the lines in his face deeper in the morning light. Black, no sugar, Mitchell said as Jack sat down. Elizabeth mentioned your preference. Thank you, Jack replied, taking a careful sip. You look concerned, Professor. Mitchell's gaze was sharp despite his obvious fatigue. Direct, good. We haven't much time. He reached into his jacket and withdrew a small flash drive. This contains portions of Samuel Reynolds' private research journals, the ones not included in company records. Elizabeth has never seen these. Jack accepted the drive but didn't pocket it yet. Why give this to me? Why not Elizabeth? Because I'm not entirely certain who can be trusted right now, Mitchell admitted. And because you're new to this situation and with no prior allegiances except to Elizabeth herself. He leaned forward slightly. Samuel was more than just a brilliant engineer, Mr. Miller. He was a man who understood power, both its promise and its peril. The Legacy Project, Jack prompted. Mitchell nodded. Legacy is exactly what the name suggests. Samuel's final gift to humanity, an energy storage system that could end dependency on fossil fuels virtually overnight. His expression darkened. But like any transformative technology, it has dual applications. The same principles that allow unprecedented energy storage could, with modifications, create weapons of devastating potential. And Grant wants to sell to weapons manufacturers, Jack surmised. Among others, the highest bidders regardless of intention. Mitchell tapped the flash drive with a gnarled finger. Samuel anticipated this. He built fail-safes into the system, biological keys that would prevent unauthorized use. Biological keys. DNA recognition, Mitchell clarified. The Legacy prototype will only function for individuals with specific genetic markers, markers present in the Reynolds bloodline. Understanding dawned. That's why Grant has been watching Ethan. Mitchell's expression confirmed Jack's conclusion. The boy is quite literally the key to making the technology work. Elizabeth believes Grant simply wants the intellectual property, the patents. What she doesn't realize is that he needs Ethan as well. Jack felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. You're suggesting Grant might try to take the child. I fear it's already in motion, Mitchell replied grimly. My contacts in university security reported someone accessing Elizabeth's personal files in the alumni database over the weekend. Her emergency contacts, including Emma's school information. Jack was already on his feet, phone in hand. I need to call the school. Wait, Mitchell cautioned. If Grant is monitoring your communications, a sudden call pulling Emma from school would confirm she's a vulnerability. He reached for his cane, pushing himself upright with effort. My car's outside. We can drive there directly. I should warn Elizabeth. Jack said, already texting Mrs. Patterson that he was returning to collect Emma for a doctor's appointment. After we secure Emma, Mitchell agreed. Elizabeth is at Reynolds Technologies headquarters, one of the most secure buildings in Pittsburgh. The children are the vulnerable points right now. They moved through the cathedral's Grand Commons toward the exit, Mitchell keeping pace despite his cane. Outside, a black Lincoln town car waited at the curb, the driver stepping out to open the rear door as they approached. Oakland Elementary, Mitchell instructed as they settled into the back seat. As quickly as possible, James. The driver nodded and pulled smoothly into traffic. Jack used the drive to call Elizabeth's office, only to be informed by her assistant that she was in a closed meeting with the board of directors and couldn't be disturbed. It's an emergency, Jack insisted. I need to speak with her immediately. I'm sorry, Mr. Miller, but the board meeting is absolutely critical. The assistant replied with practiced politeness. I can have her call you as soon as it concludes. Jack ended the call in frustration. She's unavailable. Board meetings at Reynolds Technologies are conducted in a Faraday cage room, Mitchell explained. No signals in or out. A security measure Samuel implemented years ago after a competitor attempted electronic eavesdropping. The elementary school came into view, its brick facade and colorful playground visible from a block away. As they approached, Jack noticed a dark sedan parked across from the school entrance, the same vehicle he'd spotted near his apartment building. That car, Jack said, pointing it out to Mitchell, it's been watching my building. Mitchell leaned forward to address the driver. James, stop here. Don't approach the school directly. The Lincoln pulled to the curb, half a block from the school. Jack scanned the area with practiced efficiency, noting positions, sight lines, and potential threats. 2 men in the sedan, he reported quietly. Driver and passenger. They're watching the main entrance. Mitchell's expression was grave. Grant's people, almost certainly. Jack was already formulating a plan. I'll approach from the side street, enter through the staff parking lot. The kindergarten classrooms are on the ground floor east wing. He checked his watch. It's 9:27. They should be in their first activity period. I'll have James circle around to the rear exit, Mitchell suggested. Less visible for extraction. Jack nodded, appreciating the professor's clear thinking under pressure. Give me your phone. They might be monitoring mine. Mitchell handed over a slim smartphone. Speed dial 1 for James. 10 minutes, Jack said, already moving toward the side street that would give him access to the school's eastern entrance. He walked with purposeful casualness. Just another parent approaching the school, nothing to draw attention from the watching sedan. The staff entrance required a key card, but Jack had long since made a point of knowing all access routes to Emma's school. A delivery door at the kitchen loading dock was propped open for a produce delivery, allowing him to slip inside unnoticed. From there, he navigated the familiar hallways to Mrs. Patterson's kindergarten classroom. Through the door's window, he could see the children seated in a circle for story time, Emma's strawberry blonde curls unmistakable among them. He knocked softly, catching Mrs. Patterson's eye. She excused herself from the group and stepped into the hallway. "Mr. Miller, is everything all right?" "Family emergency," Jack explained quietly. "I need to take Emma now." Something in his tone must have conveyed the urgency because Mrs. Patterson didn't question him further. "Of course, let me get her things." Within minutes, Emma was in the hallway, her backpack and lunch bag in hand, confusion evident on her small face. "Grandpa, is it time to go already?" "Change of plans, sunshine," Jack said with a reassuring smile that didn't reach his eyes. "We're going on a little adventure today." He guided Emma toward the rear of the building, maintaining a calm exterior while scanning constantly for potential threats. Mitchell's driver had positioned the Lincoln near the playground exit as instructed. Jack lifted Emma into the back seat, climbing in beside her. "Professor Mitchell," Emma exclaimed, recognizing the elderly man from the gala. "Are you coming on our adventure too?" "Indeed I am, young lady," Mitchell replied with remarkable composure. "An educational expedition, you might say." "Where to, sir?" James asked as they pulled away from the school. Jack was about to suggest his apartment to collect essential items when Mitchell's phone rang. The professor answered, his expression shifting rapidly from inquiry to alarm. "When?" he demanded. "Are you certain?" He listened for another moment before ending the call. "Change of plans. Reynolds Technologies immediately. There's been an incident." "What kind of incident?" Jack asked, instinctively pulling Emma closer. "A security breach at the main building," Mitchell replied grimly. "And Ethan is missing from his private classroom on the executive floor." Jack felt a cold clarity descend. The focused state he'd known in combat situations where extraneous concerns fall away, leaving only objectives and obstacles. "Grant's making his move." "So it would appear." Mitchell turned to the driver. "James, call Lionel at security. Tell him to lock down the building. No one enters or leaves." As they sped toward downtown, Jack processed the implications. This was coordinated. Watchers at Emma's school, a team at Reynolds Technologies for Ethan. "Yes," Mitchell agreed, "though I don't understand why they would move in daylight with so many witnesses." "Desperation," Jack suggested, "or a timetable we don't know about." He looked down at Emma, who was watching their tense exchange with wide eyes. "We need somewhere safe for Emma." Mitchell considered for a moment. "My house in Shadyside, full security system, and my housekeeper is a former Marine." Jack nodded, making a decision. "Take us there first. Emma stays secured before we approach Reynolds Technologies." Grandpa, Emma's small voice broke through their tactical discussion. "Is Ethan in trouble?" Jack met her worried gaze, weighing honesty against protection. "We think so, sunshine, and we're going to help him. But first we need to make sure you're safe." "Because of the men watching our building?" Emma asked with unexpected perception. Jack blinked in surprise. "You noticed them," Emma nodded solemnly. "They had a big camera with a long tube like Ethan said. I saw them yesterday when we went for ice cream." Jack exchanged a glance with Mitchell, both men reevaluating the child's awareness. "That's right, Emma. Those men aren't nice and we need to stay away from them." "Are they the same ones who took Ethan?" "We think so," Jack confirmed, seeing no point in lying to her now. Emma's expression set with determination that reminded Jack painfully of her mother. "Then we have to help him. He's my friend." "We will," Jack promised, "but keeping you safe comes first." Mitchell's Shadyside home proved to be a stately Victorian mansion set back from the street behind wrought iron gates. James used a remote to open them, driving directly into a detached garage that closed behind them. The housekeeper, a stocky woman in her 50s with the unmistakable bearing of military service, met them at the kitchen entrance. Mitchell made quick introductions. "Ms. Rosario, this is Jack Miller and his granddaughter Emma. They'll be staying with us temporarily. Security protocol Indigo." Ms. Rosario nodded without question, immediately moving to secure the house. The panic room is prepared as always, Professor. Excellent. Mitchell turned to Jack. Emma will be safe here. Ms. Rosario is quite capable, I assure you. Jack knelt to Emma's level. I need you to stay here while I go help Ethan Sunshine. Ms. Rosario will take care of you. Emma's lower lip trembled slightly, but she nodded. Will you be back soon? As soon as I can. Jack promised, hugging her tightly. Be good and do exactly what Ms. Rosario tells you. After settling Emma with a snack and some books from Mitchell's extensive library, Jack and the professor returned to the car for the drive to Reynolds Technologies headquarters in the heart of downtown. I should be armed, Jack noted as they approached the gleaming glass tower that housed Elizabeth's company. Mitchell reached beneath the seat and produced a lockbox, entering a combination to reveal a 9mm Beretta. Samuel kept this for emergencies. I've maintained the habit. Jack checked the weapon with practiced efficiency. You seem remarkably prepared for a retired engineering professor. A ghost of a smile crossed Mitchell's lined face. Samuel and I shared more than just academic interests, Mr. Miller. During the Cold War, we both consulted on projects that required additional security clearances. The plaza in front of Reynolds Technologies was in carefully controlled chaos when they arrived. Security personnel had established a perimeter, and several Pittsburgh police vehicles were parked nearby. Mitchell's status granted them immediate access. In the main lobby, Elizabeth was pacing, her usual composed demeanor shattered. When she saw them, she rushed forward. Howard, Jack, have you heard anything? Has anyone contacted you about Ethan? Jack surveyed the security setup before responding. No contact. What happened exactly? Elizabeth ran a hand through her hair, disheveled from repeated worried gestures. Ethan was in his classroom on the executive floor. He has a private tutor here 3 days a week. During the board meeting, someone accessed the floor using executive credentials, disabled the cameras, and took him. Her voice cracked slightly. His tutor was found unconscious. They used some kind of gas. Grant's credentials still worked, Mitchell asked sharply. No, we changed all codes after he left, Elizabeth replied. They used Tom Westfield's access. Our CFO. He swears his keycard was in his wallet the entire time. Jack noted the tactical sophistication of the operation. Professional job, multiple team members inside knowledge of security protocols. Police are reviewing security footage from the building exterior, Elizabeth continued, but so far nothing. It's like they vanished. Her gaze shifted to Jack's, sudden realization dawning. Emma, is she safe? She's secure, Jack assured her. We intercepted a surveillance team at her school. She's at Mitchell's house with his housekeeper. Relief flashed across Elizabeth's face, followed immediately by renewed concern. They were targeting both children. It appears so, Mitchell confirmed, though we don't yet know why Emma would be of interest to Grant. Leverage, Jack suggested, or simply eliminating variables. If he has both children, he controls the situation completely. Elizabeth's phone chimed with a text message. She checked it, her face paling. It's from an unknown number. She read aloud, Legacy requires family connection. Bring the prototype to the Carey furnace by noon. Come alone, or Ethan faces consequences. Jack checked his watch, 10:43 a.m. Just over an hour. He turned to Mitchell. What's the Carey furnace? Abandoned steel mill on the Monongahela, Mitchell explained. Historical landmark now, but largely deserted. Perfect for an exchange. It's a trap, Jack stated flatly. Grant has no intention of releasing Ethan, not if the boy is key to activating Legacy. Elizabeth's composure returned through sheer force of will. I have to go. I can't risk Ethan's safety. Going alone guarantees failure, Jack countered. But we can use their expectations against them. A spark of hope flickered in Elizabeth's eyes. What do you mean? They expect a desperate mother willing to trade anything for her son, Jack explained. Let's give them that, on the surface, but we control the actual scenario. Mitchell nodded approvingly. A counter operation. Exactly. Jack turned to Elizabeth. Does the Legacy prototype actually work yet? Not fully, she admitted. It powers up but remains unstable. Without the final calibrations my father was working on before he died, it can't sustain output. Perfect, Jack said. Bring the prototype but modified to be useless even with Ethan present. Make Grant think he's won while we extract the boy. Elizabeth's scientific mind engaged despite her maternal worry. I could remove the core stabilization matrix. It would power up show readings but fail catastrophically if pushed beyond minimal output. How catastrophically? Jack asked with professional caution. Nothing explosive, Elizabeth clarified, but a power surge that would fry the internal components and render it useless. Do it, Jack decided. We'll need a small team, 3 at most. Too many people will alert them. Mitchell cleared his throat. I should come. I know more about legacy than anyone except Elizabeth. Jack assessed the elderly professor skeptically. No offense, Professor, but this could get physical. Mitchell tapped his cane on the marble floor. This isn't just for walking, Mr. Miller. With a twist of the handle, he withdrew a thin steel blade from within the cane shaft. Samuel and I believed in being prepared. Despite the circumstances, Jack felt a flicker of admiration for the old man's spirit. 3 it is then. Elizabeth, how quickly can you modify the prototype? 20 minutes in my lab, she replied without hesitation. Do it, Jack instructed. Then meet us in the parking garage. We'll take an unmarked company vehicle. As Elizabeth hurried toward the executive elevator, Mitchell moved closer to Jack. You've done this before, he observed quietly. Hostage extraction. Jack didn't deny it. Different terrain, same principles. Control the variables. You can be prepared for those you can't. And Grant, he's likely to be dangerous when he realizes he's been deceived. Jack checked the Beretta before concealing it beneath his jacket. So am I, Professor. So am I. While waiting for Elizabeth, Jack used Mitchell's phone to call Ms. Rosario and check on Emma. After confirming her continued safety, he requisitioned building plans for the Carey furnace from Reynolds Technologies' security office. The site was massive, over 100 acres of industrial ruins with multiple buildings, furnaces, and outstructures in various states of decay. Elizabeth rejoined them in the parking garage carrying an aluminum case, approximately the size of a small microwave. She had changed from her business attire into more practical clothing, dark pants, boots, and a fitted jacket that wouldn't restrict movement. The prototype is modified, she confirmed. It will power up show initialization sequences, but fail if they try to access full functionality. They took a company SUV with tinted windows, Jack driving, while Mitchell navigated and Elizabeth monitored her phone for any additional communications from the kidnappers. The drive to the Carey Furnace complex took them southeast along the Monongahela River through areas where Pittsburgh's industrial past was still visible in abandoned factories and weathered warehouses. There's something I don't understand, Jack said as they approached their destination. If Ethan is the key to legacy, why would Grant think he needs Emma too? Mitchell and Elizabeth exchanged a glance that didn't escape Jack's notice. What aren't you telling me? He demanded. Mitchell sighed. It's not just Reynolds' DNA that can activate legacy. Samuel designed the system to respond to specific genetic markers, markers that appear in certain bloodlines, including his own. And Emma has these markers, Jack asked, already suspecting the answer. It's possible, Elizabeth admitted. My father's records indicated several genetic profiles that would be compatible with legacy. Military personnel who served in certain classified projects were among those screened. Jack's grip tightened on the steering wheel. Gulf War, Operation Desert Shield. His mind connected dots rapidly. I was part of a specialized vaccination program before deployment. Wasn't a vaccination at all, was it? Genetic screening, most likely, Mitchell confirmed. Samuel had Pentagon connections. He believed in redundancy, multiple keys for critical systems. Jack processed this revelation with cold efficiency, filing away the personal implications to address later. Right now, only Ethan's safety mattered. So, Grant may believe Emma is a secondary key. Yes, Elizabeth said quietly. I'm sorry, Jack. I didn't realize the connection until Howard explained it to me this morning. The Carey furnace loomed before them, massive rust-colored structures rising against the sky like ancient monuments. Once the heart of Pittsburgh's steel empire, the site now stood abandoned, its towering blast furnaces and sprawling outbuildings slowly surrendering to decay. Jack parked the SUV at what had once been the main administration building, now a graffiti-covered shell. According to the site plans, this offered the best vantage point of the central furnace area where the exchange would likely occur. We still have 20 minutes, he noted, studying the complex. Elizabeth, you'll approach alone as instructed, carrying the prototype. Mitchell and I will position ourselves for coverage and extraction. How will you know where they're holding Ethan? Elizabeth asked, her voice steady despite the fear evident in her eyes. We won't until the exchange begins, Jack admitted, but Grant needs you to activate Legacy alongside Ethan. He won't harm the boy before that happens. Mitchell withdrew a small case from his pocket, opening it to reveal 3 wireless earpieces. Short-range tactical communications, another remnant of Samuel's precautions. They each took one, testing the connection before finalizing their approach plan. Jack would take a position in one of the elevated walkways connecting the furnace structures, while Mitchell would remain closer to ground level, using the maze of machinery and equipment for cover. Remember, Jack instructed Elizabeth, your only job is to keep their attention focused on you and the prototype. Stall as much as possible without making them suspicious. We'll locate Ethan and move when the opportunity presents itself. Elizabeth nodded, her expression resolute. I can handle Grant. I've been dealing with his manipulations for months. Be careful, Jack cautioned. Desperation makes people unpredictable. At precisely noon, Elizabeth began her approach to the central furnace area, carrying the aluminum case containing the modified Legacy prototype. Jack watched through compact binoculars from his elevated position, noting at least 3 armed men stationed at various points around the site. Professional posture concealed weapons, not typical security guards, but specialized personnel. 3 tangos visible, he murmured into his earpiece. Likely more concealed. Stay alert. Confirmed, Mitchell's voice responded quietly. I've identified 2 additional hostiles near the east entrance. As Elizabeth reached the central clearing before the main furnace, a figure emerged from one of the derelict buildings. Marcus Grant moved with confident precision, dressed in dark tactical clothing rather than his usual tailored suit. He carried no visible weapon, but Jack noted the slight bulge of a shoulder holster beneath his jacket. Elizabeth, Grant called out, his voice echoing slightly in the cavernous space. Punctual as always. I appreciate that quality in business associates. Where's my son, Marcus? Elizabeth demanded, her voice carrying clearly through the comms. Grant smiled thinly. Safe. And he'll remain that way provided our transaction proceeds smoothly. He gestured to the case she carried. Is that Legacy? The prototype, yes, Elizabeth confirmed. Now show me Ethan. Grant made a subtle hand gesture, and another man emerged from the building, guiding Ethan by the shoulder. The boy appeared physically unharmed, but frightened, his small face pale beneath his blonde curls. Jack shifted position, slightly calculating angles and distances. The man with Ethan was keeping him too far from Elizabeth for a clean extraction. They would need to draw them closer together. Mom, Ethan called out, his voice small but steady. It's okay, sweetie, Elizabeth reassured him. Everything's going to be fine. Grant approached Elizabeth, his attention fixed on the case. Let's verify the merchandise. Shall we open it? Elizabeth complied, setting the case on a flat piece of debris and lifting the lid to reveal the Legacy prototype, a sleek metallic device with a central cylindrical core surrounded by intricate circuitry. Even powered down, it had an undeniable presence, a sense of contained potential. Power it up, Grant instructed. I want to see initialization. Not until Ethan is beside me, Elizabeth countered firmly. Grant studied her for a moment, then nodded to his associate. Bring the boy closer, but not too close. The man guided Ethan to within about 10 feet of Elizabeth, close enough for her to see him clearly, but still too far for a safe grab. Jack began to move along the walkway, positioning himself directly above their location. If he timed it right, he could drop down and reach Ethan within seconds. Elizabeth activated the prototype, which hummed to life with a soft blue glow emanating from its core. Display panels illuminated, showing initialization sequences and power readings. Beautiful, Grant murmured, his attention momentarily fixed on the device. Samuel's masterpiece. It's not fully functional, Elizabeth warned. The final calibrations are locked in Ethan's genetic profile. Grant finished for her. Yes, I know. Samuel was quite thorough in his fail-safes. He smiled coldly. But he made one critical error, assuming his secrets would die with him. Elizabeth's expression revealed nothing. What do you mean? Your father kept records, Elizabeth. Records even you didn't know about. Grant circled the prototype, admiring it from different angles. Did you really think I spent 8 years as his head of security without learning his contingencies? His fail-safes, the true purpose of Legacy. Through his earpiece, Jack heard Mitchell's sharp intake of breath. He knows, the professor whispered. God help us. He knows everything. Legacy was never meant to be just an energy system, Grant continued. It was designed as the ultimate deterrent, a technology so potentially devastating that it would render conventional weapons obsolete. His eyes gleamed with unsettling intensity. Unlimited energy is just the commercial application. The military potential is what makes it truly valuable. My father would never have allowed legacy to be weaponized, Elizabeth insisted. Grant laughed, the sound echoing harshly off the rusted metal surroundings. Your father was a pragmatist, Elizabeth. He understood that power, real power, comes from control. He gestured toward Ethan. Why do you think he encoded the activation sequence in his grandson's DNA? Not just protection, insurance. Jack had reached the optimal position above them. Ready to move on your signal? He murmured into the comms. Mitchell status. In position, the professor confirmed quietly. Grant was still speaking, his attention divided between Elizabeth and the prototype. My buyers don't just want the technology, Elizabeth. They want the keys, the genetic templates that unlock Legacy's full potential. Elizabeth's face paled as she understood his implication. You're selling Ethan too. Along with the Miller girl, Grant confirmed casually. Two compatible genetic profiles ensuring continued access regardless of circumstances. He checked his watch. Speaking of which, my team should have acquired her by now. A shame you moved her from the school. It required adjusting our timetable. Jack felt cold rage building within him, but maintained his focus. Grant didn't yet know they had intercepted his team at the school. That misconception gave them an advantage. You'll never get away with this, Elizabeth said, playing for time. The police are already looking for Ethan. Kidnapping children will bring every law enforcement agency down on you. By the time anyone realizes what's happened, we'll be long gone, Grant replied confidently. International waters by nightfall with new identities prepared. He gestured to the prototype. Now shall we complete the activation sequence? Bring Ethan forward. As the guard moved Ethan closer to Elizabeth, Jack gave the signal. Now! Jack dropped from the walkway, landing directly behind the guard, holding Ethan. In one fluid motion, he struck the man at the base of the skull with the butt of his pistol, catching him as he crumpled to prevent noise. Simultaneously, Mitchell emerged from his hiding place, the blade from his cane flashing as he disabled one of the perimeter guards with a precise strike to the leg. Grant reacted instantly, drawing his concealed weapon and grabbing Elizabeth, using her as a shield. Miller, he snarled, recognizing Jack despite never having been formally introduced. I should have known. Jack had already pulled Ethan behind a massive piece of machinery, shielding the boy with his body. Stay down, he instructed, eyes never leaving Grant and Elizabeth. Release her, Grant, Jack called out. It's over. Your team at the school was intercepted. Emma is safe. A flash of fury crossed Grant's face, quickly controlled. Minor setback. I still have Ethan's mother and the prototype. Reasonable consolation prizes. Elizabeth caught Jack's eye, a silent communication passing between them. With a subtle nod, she triggered the fail-safe she'd built into the modified prototype. The device's blue glow intensified suddenly, the power indicators spiking into red zones as alarms began to sound from the control panel. What have you done? Grant demanded, momentarily distracted by the malfunctioning prototype. Elizabeth used that instant of distraction to drive her elbow sharply into Grant's solar plexus, breaking his grip. She dove aside as Jack raised his weapon, firing a single shot that caught Grant in the shoulder, spinning him backward. Mom! Ethan broke cover, running toward Elizabeth. Stay back! Jack shouted, but it was too late. The boy was already halfway across the open space. Grant, despite his injury, managed to regain his balance and lunge for Ethan, catching the boy's arm. Nobody move! He ordered, his weapon now pressed against Ethan's temple. Or the boy dies right here. Everything froze in that terrible tableau. Grant bleeding but determined, Ethan trembling in his grasp. Elizabeth and Jack both poised in agonized suspension. The prototype continued its warning sequence, lights flashing urgently as systems overloaded. It's finished, Grant, Jack said, calmly, his weapon still trained on the man. You're injured. Your team is down. The prototype is failing. Walk away while you still can. Always the hero, Miller, Grant sneered, just like in Desert Shield. always following orders, never questioning why. His eyes narrowed. Did you ever wonder why they selected you for those special vaccinations? Why certain soldiers were chosen for specific missions near the Iraq border? Jack kept his expression neutral, though the question struck uncomfortably close to long-buried doubts. Put down the weapon, Grant. The boy has nothing to do with this. He has everything to do with this. Grant's voice rose with fervor. Legacy isn't just technology, it's evolution. Samuel Reynolds understood that humanity needs guidance control to survive its own destructive tendencies. His grip on Ethan tightened. These children are the first generation of that controlled evolution. From behind a pile of debris, Mitchell's voice carried clearly. You misunderstood everything, Marcus. As usual. The professor emerged slowly, leaning heavily on his cane. Samuel never intended legacy as control or weapon. It was protection. A shield, not a sword. Grant's attention split between his multiple opponents, his injured shoulder clearly causing him pain. Stay back, old man. Your part in this story is over. I think not, Mitchell replied with unexpected steel in his voice. Samuel and I built fail-safes you never discovered. He raised his hand, revealing a small device that resembled a remote control, including this. Grant's eyes widened in recognition. The master override. Samuel said it was destroyed. He lied, Mitchell said simply, and pressed the central button. The effect was immediate and startling. The legacy prototype's alarm ceased abruptly, its blue glow stabilizing and then intensifying to an almost blinding brilliance. Concentric waves of energy began pulsing outward from the device, washing over everyone in the vicinity. Grant cried out in pain, his weapon falling from suddenly nerveless fingers as he released Ethan. The boy ran to his mother, who gathered him into her arms and retreated to where Jack stood, weapon still trained on Grant. What is that? Jack demanded, watching as Grant writhed on the ground, clutching his head. Neural disruption field, Mitchell explained, approaching with cautious steps. Targeted to specific neural patterns, in this case those with certain psychopathic markers. Samuel designed it as a non-lethal defense against those who would misuse legacy. Grant's movements were slowing, his consciousness clearly fading. You can't stop progress, he gasped before collapsing completely. As the energy waves dissipated, the prototype powered down, its blue glow fading to darkness. Mitchell pocketed the override device with a sigh of evident relief. Is he dead? Elizabeth asked, still holding Ethan protectively. Mitchell checked Grant's pulse. No, unconscious only. The effect is temporary, though. He'll have quite a headache when he wakes. He looked up at Elizabeth. Your father never believed in killing, even to protect his work. Another moral line Marcus failed to understand. Jack secured Grant's weapon and quickly verified that the other guards were similarly incapacitated by the energy pulse. Only then did he lower his own gun, the immediate danger past. We need to contact the authorities, he said, practical concerns reasserting themselves. And check on Emma. Elizabeth nodded, already reaching for her phone. As she made the necessary calls, Jack knelt beside Ethan, who was watching the proceedings with remarkable composure for a 5-year-old who had just experienced kidnapping and rescue. Are you okay, buddy? Jack asked gently. Ethan nodded. I knew you'd come. You're a good finder, like Emma said. Jack smiled despite the gravity of the situation. Your mom did most of the finding. She's pretty amazing. I know, Ethan agreed seriously. Grandpa Samuel said she was the smartest person he ever met. He looked over at the powered-down prototype. Is the special machine broken now? Not broken, Jack assured him. Just sleeping until it's needed again. Mitchell joined them, his elderly frame seeming more frail now that the crisis had passed. You handled yourself remarkably well, Mr. Miller. Samuel would have approved. I still have questions, Jack replied, watching as Elizabeth concluded her phone call. Many questions. And you'll have answers, Mitchell promised. But perhaps first we should retrieve young Emma and ensure both children are properly settled after their ordeal. Within the hour, police and federal agents had swarmed the Carey Furnace site. Grant and his associates were taken into custody, the charges ranging from kidnapping to industrial espionage. The legacy prototype was secured in a specialized containment unit for transport back to Reynolds Technologies. Jack, Elizabeth, Mitchell, and Ethan returned to Mitchell's Shadyside home, where Emma greeted them with excited relief, particularly happy to see her friends safe. As the children were settled in the library with snacks and the promised cookies from Ms. Rosario, the adults gathered in Mitchell's study to process the day's events. "I owe you both explanations," Elizabeth began, the composed CEO once more, though with new warmth in her partner, "and my profound gratitude." Jack accepted the glass of bourbon Mitchell offered, taking a contemplative sip before responding. "The genetic markers Grant mentioned, my connection to Desert Shield. I need to understand what I've been part of without knowing it." Mitchell settled into a leather chair with a weary sigh. "A fair request, the short version is this. In the late 1980s, Samuel discovered unusual genetic patterns in certain individuals, patterns that suggested enhanced neural integration with electronic systems." "In English, Professor," Jack prompted. Elizabeth smiled slightly. "Some people can interface with technology more effectively than others. Their brains process electronic interactions more efficiently, what we now might call a natural aptitude for computational thinking. Samuel theorized this trait might be evolutionary, humanity adapting to a technological world." Mitchell continued. "The military became interested naturally. Soldiers who could better integrate with increasingly computerized weapon systems would have tactical advantages." "Uche, the vaccination program," Jack surmised. "They were identifying soldiers with these markers." Elizabeth nodded. "And my father was tracking the results. Not for weapons as Grant believed, but for what would eventually become legacy, a clean energy system that could only be activated by those with inherent ethical frameworks." She looked at Jack directly. "People like you who instinctively protect rather than exploit." Jack absorbed this information, connecting it to his own past and to Emma's future. "And Emma inherited these markers from me." "Through your daughter, yes," Mitchell confirmed. "The traits appear to strengthen in subsequent generations. Both Emma and Ethan show remarkably strong neural compatibility patterns, which is why Grant wanted them both. Multiple keys for multiple buyers." "What happens now?" Jack asked, practical concerns foremost. "Grant's in custody, but his buyers are still out there. The children could remain targets." Elizabeth set her untouched drink aside. "Reynolds Technologies has extensive security resources. Ethan and I will be protected." She met Jack's gaze. "And I'd like to extend that protection to you and Emma, if you'll accept it." "The business offer still stands as well," she added, "perhaps more relevant now than ever. Miller Mechanical could provide excellent cover for enhanced security measures around both families." Jack considered her words, weighing options and implications. After today's events, returning to their normal unprotected life seemed not just inadvisable but irresponsible. Yet the thought of living under constant security of Emma, or growing up in that environment, troubled him deeply. "I need time to think," he finally said, "to consider what's best for Emma." "Of course," Elizabeth agreed immediately. "Take all the time you need." Mitchell cleared his throat. "If I may offer a suggestion, perhaps the most effective security would be proximity. The Reynolds estate has a very comfortable guest house that has stood empty since Samuel's passing. Convenient for business collaboration and mutual security arrangements." Jack raised an eyebrow at the transparent matchmaking, but found the idea had merit on practical grounds alone. "I'll consider it," he said, neither accepting nor rejecting the proposal. Their conversation was interrupted by laughter from the library. Emma and Ethan, resilient as only children can be, already recovering from the day's trauma through play and friendship. Jack moved to the doorway, watching them, quietly struck by how quickly they had bonded, despite their different backgrounds. Elizabeth joined him, her shoulder lightly touching his as they observed the children. "They're extraordinary, aren't they?" she murmured. "After everything that's happened, they still find joy so readily." "It's a gift," Jack agreed. "One we should protect at all costs." "We will," Elizabeth said with quiet certainty. "Together." Jack turned to face her, seeing beyond the billionaire CEO to the mother, the daughter, the woman who had fought so fiercely to protect what she loved. In her determination, he recognized a kindred spirit, someone who understood duty, sacrifice, and the courage to face unknown dangers. Together, he agreed the word, a commitment to whatever challenges lay ahead. In the library, Emma was showing Ethan her star bracelet, the two children head-to-head in earnest discussion. Their innocent connection, friendship untainted by the adult world's complications, represented everything worth protecting, everything worth fighting for. Jack Miller had begun this journey with a simple act of kindness, helping a lost boy find his mother in a crowded train station. That choice had led him into danger revelation and now unexpectedly into a new beginning. Not just a business opportunity, but a chance to be part of something larger than himself once more. As he watched the children, Jack felt certainty settle within him. Whatever complications came with this new path, whatever dangers still lurked beyond today's victory, he had found his purpose again. In protecting these children and standing beside Elizabeth in facing the unknown, with courage rather than fear, he had rediscovered the man he had always been beneath the years of quiet survival. The man who would always extend his hand to those in need, no matter the cost or consequence. The man who had held a lost boy's hand and in doing so changed his own fate forever.